Thokozani, welcome to another great and exciting episode of Isasendumbeni. And of course, I'm your host, Gogo Moyo. Today, we're going to be talking about being a gifted child. Today, we're going to be talking about people like you and I. Gifted people oftentimes are very intelligent, they're very smart. They catch on very quickly. They don't struggle a lot with learning. A lot of things come very naturally for them. They also have a lot of luck on their side. Like, they become very lucky people, whether it's with money or maybe jobs, opportunities. It's not something that they put a lot of great effort behind for them to attain them, and it's usually a wow moment for other people when they look at the story and how things unfolded. Bana ba badimo have such a deep connection with their guides that half the time throughout this person's life, they are never in control and they're always like 25 steps behind, because badimo are always ahead of them and creating all these things before them. With that said, it does not mean that maphelo a bana ba badimo are easy, because this is where character is made. This is where character comes from and is born. All the things that you go through in your life, the challenges, the struggles, the down times that you spend where you are literally living on faith alone, those very tough and trying times are where badimba also bring part of the biggest lessons of who you are, what you are, where you come from, what you're made up of. And I don't think I've met any successful person who does not have a difficult past, or someone who's absolutely inspiring and phenomenal to come from easy backgrounds. So they struggle a lot from their childhood. Sometimes they even are born into very crazy families, and the dynamics are really, really bad for that child, but they still prevail and they overcome. And gifted children are amazing because of such experiences in their lives. Bana ba badimo are often misdiagnosed medically, especially because their character is in such a way that they want to withdraw a lot. They like isolation, they like their stillness, their quiet time. Bana ba badimo in most instances like to retreat and not engage so much with what other people are engaging and what's going on around them. Because there's a lot of lessons that happen behind the scenes where they're not loud or very much in your face, but they exist between a gifted child and their spirits, their guides, badimba bona. And when this happens, this is where a lot of the education goes on behind the scenes, and this could be via visions, intuition, or even sensories, your taste, touch, smell, sight. All those things get affected. All of a sudden you start smelling things around you. Honka mqombothi, honka sneefy, honka pudi, honka madi, luatle, honka very specific things. Or uwele hokhalla a lot, like you want and desire things that you don't necessarily would want to, that you'd ask for. For instance, ubatla motokgo mabele, or something that's very specific outside of what you normally eat and engage. Bana ba badimo experience a lot of quiet moments where the conversation is so very intimate that a lot of the people around them miss it. This allows for bana ba badimo gore babe in tune. I've got stories of my own of how I got to discover that I'm a gifted child. Well, for instance, one day I was at my home with my mom and my brother's friend, who's like a family friend now. So we were sitting at home, and then I fell ill. I started getting these fits and shakes, and my body went into some kind of spasm. And mind you, I've never experienced or suffered from anything of that kind before. And eventually they grabbed me, they put me into the back of the car, they drove me to the hospital. When I got there, the doctors searched me, my blood, my body, my everything, scans of any kind, of all sorts, and they checked if anything was wrong with my body, and turned out there was nothing wrong, to a point where the doctor came to me himself and he said to me, Osi, and it was the first time I've ever been told such. Loosely translated, it meant that, hey, have you ever visited a Sangoma before? I think you're a gifted person. That's what the doctor said to me. And this was the first time I'd ever heard anything of that nature, or I have been exposed to such a question, or such a feeling or sensation in my body where I had needed that kind of intervention and not medical. But Babadimu get their signs in different ways. Not everyone is going to be as loud as perhaps mine, but there's someone who's a very subtle dreamer, like very subtle personality, very quiet, very timid, someone who likes being a nomad a lot, someone who likes being isolated from people, occupying their own spaces, being incredibly emotional and sensitive to spirits and energies and all the things around them, someone who can just tell by an energy or an aura of somebody that this is a good or bad person. It's easier for them to identify if something is worth pursuing or not. These are the people that will inevitably have one gift or another, whether ke boporofeta, ke bongaka, ke ba a nurse, someone who's more westernized in terms of providing solutions to the human body as well as spirit. So we mustn't almost look for like a cut out template of what a gifted child is supposed to look like or be. If you just know that a lot of things come very naturally for you and are very innate, and they come so very naturally in a very relaxed and even sometimes aggressive, again, heed those moments and look out for the signs that you have. I know at times you may even find yourself in a very unnatural or misunderstood place in your life where people around you don't get you. They don't get anything about what's going on with you, or they always say you're too emotional, or like moody, or snacks, like they could literally say a lot of things about you, but it's like I'd rather just be in my stillness and in my quietness and not be engaged. Like, I'll come out when I want to converse and engage. And unfortunately, that's not how the world works. The world doesn't wait for us to want to interact and then it engages, but it sometimes engages us. I know also one of the most uncomfortable things that I suffered from when I wasn't realizing my gift as well as I should have, or been more in tune, or advancing towards it as it was advancing towards me, was I found myself depressed and lonely for the most part. There was no one who could relate to some of the things that I would experience and go through, and that made it incredibly difficult in trying to have conversations with people around you, especially when you can't put references to things, and anything that you can put references to are either too scary or too unnatural for them to understand or to sympathize or empathize. Depression became a really big thing for me because I found that I'd end up having to see a psychologist and be misdiagnosed and told that they put me on antidepressants, or they say I'm bipolar, or like a lot of things are like mood swings, short-temperedness, extremes, highs and lows. People would say that you are somewhat aggressive, or you have anger issues, you have unstable mental illnesses, and you're quite a sickly person as well, where you find that your body gives up on you quite a lot. And in most of these cases, you find that you are incurable by the Western medicine. And if anything, you need a ceremony or something significant like that happens in your family, where your change or a certain change in how Badimo communicate with you starts changing or moves onto a different level, is while when other people are busy conducting ceremonies in your home, whether they're Thanksgivings or a home cleansing, something as simple as a home cleansing, or even you getting a body cleansing like ukeza emfuleni, or fasting. Sometimes you may find that whatever it is that you introduce as new at the time may result in opening up or leading you to connect differently and more vividly and more aggressively. So it all depends on how much of yourself you open up, because the more you open up, the more you will start tapping into these things. And of course, they're not the norm. So you might end up thinking that you're going crazy, whereas you really are not. You just need to tap into them a lot more. Like, give them the quiet time that it so much desires from you, so that you can go back out there into the world and be a functional person amongst other people at your jobs, at schools, etc. Don't always be defiant of some of the things that are asked for by Itlozi from you, which is like quiet time, meditation, yoga. Sports is good for you. Exercising is incredibly good. It releases all the tensions that we end up feeling because of some of our thoughts remain unsaid and unspoken. So they end up building quite a bit of a frustration in us because we don't feel like we can express ourselves freely and converse. So that's some of the things that I've realized about being a gifted child. The second story is I was back in university during my second year. I think it was time for summer break, and I don't quite remember the details, but we were having fun with my friends, and I went out with some of my friends that evening. We slept over at one of our friends' houses. I was sick the whole night. I had excruciating back pain, and I couldn't sleep throughout the whole night. I tried to do some yoga moves or to stretch or anything that could have helped, but literally my back was like feeling like it was going to snap. I had the most crazy and intense pain I had ever experienced in my body. That morning I went back to res. It was one of those situations where I couldn't have left to have gone to find any kind of help. As a kid we find ourselves in situations that are not the best for us. And I went back to my room at res, and I locked the room and I slept in my bed. And a friend of mine walked in and she said to me, "Girl, you don't look okay. What's wrong? What's going on with you?" And I'm like, "I don't feel good. But can you please call my parents? Because I don't feel like I need to go to the hospital for whatever's going on with me." Okay? My friend insisted, but I'm like, "Don't. Rather call my parents. Something's wrong with me physically, but it feels rather very spiritual." Hey, okay, so that's what she did. She called my parents, and an hour later my parents arrived, and I passed out. The last thing I remember seeing was being picked up and taken out of my bed and being moved from the building to the car. And I passed out again. And I'd go into some kind of sleep mode that I wasn't quite familiar with or hadn't experienced before either. And I remember a glimpse of being woken up in the middle of the chaos, because while I woke up the second time, I found that I was still being picked up, but we were walking through the hustle and bustle of Joburg. Like, Komorauha, Chicken Licken, there's like a train station or sporo situation more, and the Komorauha sporo so are like very bad looking and shady looking hotels, or rather buildings, dilapidated buildings. And I found myself being picked up and being taken into one of these buildings, and I'm like, what is going on? But I'm still disorientated, and I pass out again. And when I wake up, I'm sitting in front of this guy. He's a sangoma, and my parents. And when I look around the room, I see a photograph of myself. Like, okay, what's going on here? I look at my parents, and while I do that, this guy says, "I told you before this child ends up here, or something like this happens to her." And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Have I been set up? Like, what's going on here? And those are the times when I realized that I was incredibly gifted, and I had no understanding of it. I was not physically ill, but instead I was spiritually ill. And that's how a gifted person also is affected by the things that go on around them. They're very sensitive to spirit and energies, and we cannot control half the time what kind of energies we tap into, or how much freedom Badim we have in our bodies, whether trained or untrained. Lastly, the story that I have, we were renovating at my home, at my family home, and my siblings and I were sleeping in the same bedroom. So all our beds were scattered around the room, in the master bedroom then. And that night, I felt like I was going to sleep, like gekhathetse. So I can feel my body's literally tired. But I move to the bed and I'm like, okay, I get a sensation of I'm not going to sleep. Like, it's quite weird. At the time, I'm like, you know what, guys, all I need is sleep, so whatever. And after I say that, I literally pass out and I go into a sleep where my subconscious is asleep. And my body is taken over by spirit, like Matimbaka, and I'm now a vessel, I'm a cell, where all the activity is going to happen. And my brother's sitting on his bed watching movies on the laptop with his headphones, and he can see me make movements from the corner of the room, and he's trying to talk to me, but he can see that I'm not responding to him, so what's going on? And by how he describes it, I would literally sit up and engage him in conversation, where he'd run out and call my parents, because as a kid he wouldn't really know what the hell is going on here, and like, this is not my sister, it sure looks like her, but this is not behaving like my sister, so what's going on? He went and fetched my parents, who came and stood in front of me, and I would change posture, change voice, I would literally assume a character that was not myself, and I would continue to speak, right? And whatever I talk about will be something very specific and family related, like I'd be able to say who I am by name, etc. And in most instances, because it ended up happening twice, and on the third night it was happening so much that my parents literally saw that, okay, we are not in control of this, and this is becoming unsafe for our daughter, because at some point I wanted to jump through the window to go point out something that was dug up in the yard or something like that. But it was really, really intense, and it was like, what the hell is going on? Like, every time that explained to me, I'd feel very much possessed. But I knew that my body belonged to me, and I knew that there was no inch of darkness that I shared and occupied the space with me, being my body. So what's going on? And that's when the following day I was then taken to a sangoma who let me sleep over at her house. And on that night ngavukelwa idlozi, bangishayela igubhu ngavukelwa idlozi, and in essence that's where my journey of uthwasa began. It's also not like that for a lot of people. Not everyone is going to get their calling in a very distinct and so aggressive and passionate way. All of the things that were happening to me. I induced none of them. I knew nothing of them. By my knowledge, there was no one in my family who was a traditional healer or had a gift of the sort. I just knew people that would go to church and would be staunch churchgoers and Christians and but never bongoma, you know. It was like something that was so far-fetched for me, and like how I was raised. So it was a shock. Khutwala ke badimo is already the most extreme. In my case, it was the most extreme. It's almost like they had started everything else. And in essence, if I think back, they had, because they started me out with the dreams when I was a kid. And I'd see things, and I'd see deaths, and I'd see car crashes, I'd see illnesses, I'd see just about anything as a kid, and I'd tell my elders. And they'd be, you know, it would shock everyone that how is this kid able to see so much, and why is this kid able to have so much insight that as her elders we don't have. Another point I'd like to touch on about being a gifted child is how sometimes you may find yourself to be an old soul, where your character doesn't quite meet that of your peers, where some of the things that your peers are interested in, or spend their monies on, spend their time on, don't quite interest you, and you'd rather move on to other things, or you spend time with older people. Character-wise, you do end up pulling away from the general crowd, like the hip crowd, the popular crowd, not because you're a boring person, but because you are led and fed into different things, where it rather speaks to your spirit than your popularity or your social levels. Other things such as deja vus, where you find that you suffer incredibly a lot from deja vu. I just use the word suffer, but it's not really you suffering from it, but you experience it quite a lot more, deja vus, because I asked someone one time when I was interviewing them for a different series, where I am interviewing Izangoma. Rather, it's a conversation about post-Utwasa versus before Utwasa. And Mr. Dumimalachi said to me that deja vus are what help you. They're like a helping hand. It's almost like because you were here before, because you've experienced this before, it alters the way you behave or react then to when that thing eventually does happen. When you do have the deja vu about it, it's almost like you've been here before. So instead of doing that, handle it this way, or be mindful of that, and this will be the result of that. So it's almost like you get a tap into what's still coming, and having the ability and the fluidity to be able to alter and shift. If you find yourself struggling at school or at work, where you would wake up in the morning and you feel great and you feel good and you feel healthy, strong, but the moment you get to work or school, you start feeling some type of way, you start feeling sick, heavy, and like literally you start literally changing, from your mood. That also is another conversation with that you're having with your ancestors in terms of the environment that you find yourself in. Sometimes it could even be your colleagues that bring the bad energy, or it's the actual place itself that you're not supposed to be in. Sometimes studying is difficult and all you see are blank white pieces of paper in front of you, and you can't see the words or make out the words or capture the thought of what's going on the stuff that you're learning about or delivering. The different ways of how Badimo can affect us as being a gifted child that's not listening to their calling or what's required of them, an action that's required of them at the time. They will penetrate and influence the life that you currently are living and leading, where you may struggle with relationships, whether it's romantically or it's family dynamics, where you and your parents just don't get along, and you're literally passing ships in the night, where you can't make out anything about each other, you can't relate on any level. It's really, really difficult to engage and try explain or even understand where they're coming from. So it's going to be incredibly difficult first before it gets better, because for it to get better you have to be a person that's really open and willing to listen more and understand your gift and your calling and what it requires of you, and what kind of spaces it needs you to be in, how to fill your day with activities that will be able to recharge you rather than drain you, methods and ways of how to communicate with Badimba, how that allow you to ease the tension and the stresses that go on in your mind and in your body, and as well as unclog your spiritual connections with the universe around you. This becomes incredibly important, because if you are able to leave the stresses that you are struggling with every day, it shows that you can enter or escape into another dimension where you can rather be a more freer version of yourself and a more relaxed and open-minded person that's open to being taught all kinds of things by Badimba How. I think I've covered a large chunk of what it means to be a gifted person. All of us, I believe, that we are gifted in one way or another, because every single person under the sun who's living has Badimu. For as long as you have a family member that has existed before you and has passed, that's your ancestor. And we all have clans and clans and clans, mabandla on mabandla on mabandla, because you are not just raised by your family alone, whether it's maternal or paternal, but even the people around you and the relationships that you form. And ultimately you have a big group of influences in terms of spirit energy and guides around you in your camp, and mindful of all the energies that do surround you and how they come to present themselves to you. It won't be the same as everyone else. Again, there's no template or a cookie cut out for how we should all be and function. Instead, it's going to be very specific to each and every one of us. And one question I'd like to leave you with today: how honest are you being with yourself about the things that you see in your visions, in your dreams, in your sleep? How honest are you being about the way you live your life currently and what you should actually be doing, whether it's a career move in or change what it is that you're studying, or change the home that you live in and move to somewhere else, to change the way you dress your body or change the way you express yourself, whether it's verbally or how you wear your hair, how you wear your clothes. How honest are you being about yourself and the image that you go around portraying about who you are? Who in that is really you? Thank you for tuning in to another great and exciting episode of Gogo Moyo Speaks. It's Asendumbeni, and yeah, Gogo Moyo has been your host to this lovely, lovely Friday.